No! Ah, get off! No! Please!
Imagine waking up in the suffocating heat of the African bush. Pitch black, silence pressing in on your chest. And then you hear it. A man just inches from where you sleep, thrashing, being dragged from his tent. There is no majestic roar, just the sound, the wet, heavy sound of something impossibly large pulling its prey into the thorn bushes. By morning, all that remains is a smeared trail of blood disappearing into the wilderness. 30,000 men came to Kenya. They came to build a railway for the British Empire. Instead, they walked into a slaughterhouse. If the apex predators of the savannah suddenly learned to hunt humans for sport, how many would die before anyone tried to stop them? And who is next? Welcome back to Storytime Chronicles. To all our returning deep divers, thank you. Your incredible support means everything. Seriously, you keep showing up and we keep diving deeper. Tonight, we are going back 120 years, back to the unforgiving African bush, where 2 rogue lions declared war on the British Empire and nearly won. This isn't just a story about animal attacks. No, this is the chronicle of a 9-month siege, a siege that brought a multi-million-dollar colonial mega project to a dead stop. We are going to break down the staggering body count, the desperate hunter pushed to the edge of his sanity, and the chilling biological twist that no one saw coming. If you love true historical stories that play out like absolute horror movies, drop a fire in the comments right now. Let's step into the nightmare of Tsavo. The year is 1898, and the British Empire is carving its way across the map, relentless, iron-willed. The crown jewel of their East African expansion, the Uganda Railway, a massive, daring engineering feat designed to link the Indian Ocean to the interior of Lake Victoria. Critics back in London called it the lunatic line because of its astronomical cost and the sheer impossibility of the terrain. To build it, the British imported over 30,000 laborers from British India, men who found themselves toiling under a sun that felt like a physical weight. Among them was the man sent to oversee construction of a critical bridge over the Tsavo River, Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson. Patterson was the quintessential Victorian officer, Anglo-Irish soldier, experienced big game hunter, a man who firmly believed that British steel and discipline could conquer any corner of the wild. He arrived in March of that year, and what he found? A landscape the local tribes had already named the Place of Slaughter. The terrain was a hellish maze of wait-a-bit thorn bushes, dense enough to hide a man or a monster just 3 feet away. The air was thick with the drone of tsetse flies, the ground a parched red dust that coated everything. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, Patterson was confident. He set up his camp with the ordered precision of a military outpost. He viewed the African wilderness as a puzzle to be solved. The local lions? Mere trophies for his wall. He was there to build a bridge, and he wouldn't let the superstitions of his workers or the harshness of the scrublands slow his progress. He believed he was the master of this domain. But as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the savannah in shades of bruised purple and dried blood, the silence of the bush grew heavy. The construction was on schedule. The bridge was rising. But the real nightmare was about to begin. The terror began in earnest on a night in late March, and it didn't arrive with a warning. It was a violent rupture of the camp's routine. A well-liked Sikh worker named Ungan Singh was sleeping in his tent when he was suddenly seized by the head, dragged into the night. Witnesses described a blur of tawny fur and a sound that wasn't quite a roar, more like a heavy, determined huffing. By morning, all that was found were Singh's remains, barely recognizable, scattered near the edge of the scrub. This wasn't the work of a typical starving scavenger. No, these lions were hunting with a calculated, almost eerie precision. As the weeks passed, a pattern emerged, one that defied everything the British knew about animal behavior. The lions didn't just attack the outskirts, they bypassed the heavy thorn fences called bomas that the workers had built for protection. The lions seemed to understand the layout of the camps better than the men who built them, moving like shadows through the gaps. Among the Indian laborers, a whisper began to spread. These weren't animals at all. They called them shaitani, devils, and eventually the ghost and the darkness. They believed these were the spirits of ancient kings reborn to punish the British for scarring the land with their iron rails. The workers' terror was visceral, but at the top, the railway bosses remained in a state of cold denial. To the administrators in London, these were just big cats. A few more guards could handle it. They saw the situation as a logistical nuisance, a mere delay in the imperial schedule. But the men on the ground knew the truth. They saw the way the lions worked as a team, one often flushing the prey while the other waited in the tall grass. They didn't just kill for survival. They ate with a chilling efficiency, and they were getting bolder. Every failed attempt to trap them only seemed to sharpen their intellect. They began to ignore the cattle and goats tied up as bait, preferring the scent of the men huddled in their tents. The curiosity loop was tightening. How do you stop a predator that isn't afraid of fire, noise, or even the scent of man? Patterson began to realize that the traditional methods of hunting were failing. One humid evening, the tension reached a breaking point. The entire camp was huddling behind the thickest thorn boma they had ever constructed, rifles at the ready, fire pits blazing to keep the shadows at bay. Then a sound emerged, one that chilled every man to the bone. It wasn't coming from the darkness of the bush outside. It was a low, vibrating roar, seeming to shake the very earth. And it was coming from inside the thorn boma. They were already there. The toll didn't just climb, it accelerated. What started as a tragic incident once a week became a nightly harvest of souls. By June, the lions had killed dozens of men. The official tally varied. British records would later claim 28. The workers insisted the number was well over 100. But for those trapped in the camps, the numbers mattered less than the grisly reality of the aftermath. Every morning, the search parties would find the same haunting trail: a discarded boot, a blood-soaked piece of cloth, or the gnawed remains of a friend. The atmosphere shifted from fear to a suffocating, paralyzing dread. The work on the bridge slowed to a crawl because no man wanted to be the first one out of his tent at dawn or the last one back at dusk. The savannah, once a place of industry, had become a graveyard with no headstones. Patterson was now working around the clock to find a solution, but the lions seemed to be mocking his every effort. He tried poisoning carcasses with enough strychnine to kill an elephant. The lions would sniff the meat, let out a low, vibrating growl of disdain, and walk away to find a fresh, living human target. He built elaborate box traps with heavy iron doors, used live goats as bait. The lions would leap over the traps entirely, or in one terrifying instance, actually entered a trap, killed the bait, and escaped through a gap before the heavy door could latch. I sigh. Even armed patrols were useless. The lions moved so silently through the wait-a-bit thorns that by the time a guard heard a twig snap, the cat was already gone with its prize.
You hear that?
Every defensive measure Patterson implemented was met with a chilling adaptation from the predators. It was as if they were learning the mechanics of human survival and finding every loophole. For Patterson, this was no longer about a bridge. It was personal. He began spending every night perched in trees or on makeshift platforms, his eyes strained from peering into the ink-black bush until they burned. He stopped sleeping, his mind a feverish loop of ballistics and bait. His authority was slipping too. The Indian workers began to see Patterson not as their protector, but as a man who had invited this curse upon them. They believed his very presence and his insistence on continuing the lunatic line was what kept the demons fed. The Anglo-Irish colonel was becoming as much a ghost as the lions themselves, haggard, hollow-eyed, increasingly isolated in his own camp. He was losing control of his men, and he was losing his mind. The breaking point came in late 1898. A mass mutiny erupted as hundreds of workers refused to leave their tents, and eventually the unthinkable happened. The railway stopped. Over 500 laborers boarded a train and fled back toward the coast, declaring that they would rather face the wrath of the British Empire than another night in Tsavo. The bridge to the interior was dead in the water. Thousands of miles away, the British Parliament was being grilled about why two animals were holding a world power hostage. The situation was a global embarrassment. Patterson was left with a skeleton crew and a grim realization. The lions weren't just eating his men, they were winning the war. They had successfully cleared the area of most human life, yet they didn't leave. They stayed, stalking the few who remained with a terrifying level of patience. They were no longer just lions. They were a tactical force that seemed to anticipate every move Patterson made. He was finally starting to realize that his role had shifted. He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the bait. Because the strongest curiosity loop of the video remains. Everything they tried made the lions smarter. With the railway paralyzed and the camps nearly deserted, Patterson knew the time for conventional traps was over. He turned to engineering. He constructed an elaborate iron cage, a box of steel rails with a sliding door triggered by a tripwire. He used live goats as bait, and occasionally brave or desperate volunteers. The lions, they would walk around the cage, sniff the iron, then move on to a tent 300 yards away and kill a man instead. Desperate, Patterson built what the locals called a machan, a small, rickety platform lashed together with rope and wood, perched 10 feet high in a spindly tree. It was a miserable, cramped existence. He would spend 12 hours at a time in total silence, his rifle across his knees, fighting the urge to sneeze, cough, or even breathe too loudly. The African night is never truly quiet, and every rustle of the dry grass sounded like a 300-pound predator closing in for the kill. It was during these lonely vigils that Patterson had his first brush with death. One night, while perched on a particularly flimsy platform, he heard the familiar heavy huffing of a lion directly beneath him. He couldn't see it in the moonless dark, but he could smell it, the metallic scent of dried blood, the musky odor of a wild animal. He waited, his finger trembling on the trigger. Suddenly, the tree shuddered. The lion wasn't just passing by, it was testing the wood. It began to claw at the trunk, trying to figure out how to reach the meat shivering on the branches above. Patterson fired blindly into the dark, the flash of the muzzleloader temporarily blinding him. The lion vanished into the scrub, but the message was clear. The height didn't make him safe, it only made him a more visible target. A few nights later, the second close call nearly ended the story of the Tsavo Bridge forever. Patterson was stalking a sound in the tall grass near the riverbed, breaking his own rule, never hunt on foot after dark. He thought he was tracking one of the lions, following the rhythmic crunch of dry leaves, but as he rounded a bend in the trail, the sound stopped. The silence was absolute. In that moment, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He realized the sound hadn't been moving away from him, it had been circling him. He was standing in a natural clearing, and the ghost was somewhere in the 3-foot-tall grass just yards away, watching him. Patterson backed away inch by inch, his rifle leveled at nothing but shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He made it back to the boma, but he didn't sleep. He knew now that the lions weren't just avoiding him, they were playing with him. This leads us to the night that changed everything. At approximately 13:30 in our story, the dynamic of the hunt underwent a terrifying evolution. Patterson was back on a new platform, a sturdier one, near a fresh kill he'd used as bait. But the lions didn't go for the bait. They didn't even go for the camp. They came for the tree. For the first time, the lions coordinated a direct assault on the hunter himself. One lion began a series of false charges from the front, keeping Patterson's eyes locked forward, while the other began to circle behind, completely silent. Think about that for a second. If you were sitting on a wooden plank in the dark, knowing 2 man-eaters were actively coordinating to pull you down, would you stay, or would you run and risk being caught in the open? Just as the first lion made his final approach, the moon broke through the clouds. Patterson saw the eyes. And in that split second, the hunter realized he was seconds away from becoming just another tally in the ledger of the dead. On the night of December 9th, the first ghost finally took on physical form. Patterson was perched on a shaky scaffolding, 4 poles and a few planks of wood. Below him lay the carcass of a donkey, but the lion wasn't interested in the bait. It was interested in the man above. Patterson watched as the massive, maneless beast crept through the tall grass, a shadow moving within shadows. When the lion was just yards away, Patterson leveled his .303 rifle, squeezed the trigger. The lion roared in agony, a sound that ripped through the camp and echoed off the distant hills. But it didn't die instantly. It vanished into the thicket like a phantom. The next morning, Patterson followed the crimson trail into the brush and found the first man-eater dead. The camp went wild. Men cheered, wept, kissed Patterson's feet, believing the curse was lifted. But the victory was short-lived. The second lion was still out there, and now it was alone, hungry, and vengeful. 3 weeks later, on December 29th, the final showdown began in the rocky riverbed of the Tsavo. This wasn't a clean hunt. It was a 3-hour war of attrition, pushing Patterson to his absolute limit. He tracked the second lion into the dense scrub, realizing too late that he was being lured into a lethal bottleneck. The lion emerged from the brush like a lightning strike, a blur of muscle and fury. Patterson fired, hitting the beast in the chest. But it kept coming, with a terrifying resilience. He fired again, another hit. The lion retreated into a deep, shadowed ravine. Patterson pursued, his adrenaline masking a paralyzing fear. As he moved through the rocks, the lion suddenly lunged from an overhang. Patterson pulled the trigger. His rifle jammed. In that heartbeat of pure terror, he scrambled back, cleared the jam with shaking hands, and fired a final, desperate shot into the lion's head as it was mid-leap. Then there was silence, wind whistling through the dry scrub. No more huffing in the dark, no more screams in the night. Patterson stood over the fallen giant, his chest heaving, realizing the 9-month siege was finally over. The lunatic line could finally move forward, but the soil of Tsavo would forever be stained by the ghosts of those the lions had claimed. With the silence of the guns came the grim task of accounting. Official British reports claimed 28 Indian workers were killed. Patterson himself later estimated the total death toll, including local Africans, was closer to 135. Modern isotopes and bone analysis from 2009 suggest a lower number of victims actually consumed. But the psychological trauma of the 9-month siege remains immeasurable. For decades, the whys haunted scientists. Why did these two lions abandon their natural prey? For years, theories ranged from a rinderpest plague killing off buffalo to the lions developing a taste for humans by scavenging on corpses left along the slave trade routes. However, recent dental analysis revealed the truth. Both lions suffered from severe, painful dental abscesses and jaw infections. They didn't hunt humans because they were supernatural. They hunted us because we were soft, slow, and didn't require a crushing bite to kill. Today, the ghost and the darkness no longer haunt the Tsavo scrub. After serving as floor rugs in Patterson's home for 25 years, their hides were sold to the Chicago Field Museum for $5,000, where they were reconstructed and remain on display today. From man-eaters to museum exhibits. Patterson went on to become a celebrated author and a commander in World War I, but he was forever defined by those months in 1898. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the thin veil between civilization and the raw, indifferent power of nature. Sometimes the monsters aren't hiding in the dark, waiting for a reason to strike. They're starving right in front of you, driven by a biological desperation that knows no mercy. The campfire has long since burned out, and the bridge at Tsavo stands as a silent monument to a time when two predators brought an empire to its knees. But as you walk away from the red dust of Kenya, remember the ghosts of the savannah never truly sleep. If this journey into the heart of the place of slaughter kept you up at night, make sure to smash that like button. It truly helps the channel keep these chronicles alive. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss our next descent into history's darkest corners. We want to hear from you in the comments. Which part of this story terrified you the most? Was it the relentless intelligence of the lions, or the fact that every word of this nightmare actually happened? Thank you for watching Storytime Chronicles. Sleep well, if you can.